book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about some books that I would like to give a second chance. If you didn't know, this is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out and you can participate in a topic in the future, or you can suggest a topic. I just have to hold my tea. I'm not used to the weather dropping this quickly. It was just like yesterday that it was summer, essentially. It was like really hot, and now things are starting to get cold and I'm not used to it. Pretty much, this 7 on Sunday was inspired by the fact that I feel like I've accumulated enough books over the years that I've thought twice about, that I've looked back at and thought to myself, did I read that book at the wrong time? Or maybe did I start that book at the wrong time and just DNF it, and maybe I do want to pick it up one day. Maybe I'm gonna be in the mood to pick it up one day. Or if it's a book that I didn't previously like, maybe I'll like it better. Within the last year, I read the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. I gave that series a second chance, and I'm so happy that I did, because it is now one of my favorite trilogies of all time. But when I read it initially 6 or 7 years ago, I don't think that I was at the right age to enjoy it. It is a young adult fantasy technically, but I went into it wanting something else and I didn't get that something else. So like, I wanted a good pining romance story, and that's not what I got. I got this very intense fantasy that had a lot of great messages behind it, but I wanted something more simplistic when I read it. And so when I think about some of the books that I have already read that I didn't like initially, I like to think back at the example of a second reading experience with Daughter of Smoke and Bone and realize that I could give things a second chance. I could try again with some of these books. But also, some of these books I haven't actually finished because I just so happened to start reading them at the wrong time. So I'm going to be talking about those as well. It's just going to be a combination. I'm just pretty much going to talk about all the books that I plan to give a second chance, just combine them in one video and give you the explanation as to like whether I DNF'd it and I wasn't in the mood for it, or I didn't enjoy it initially, but I want to give it a second chance because I want to see whether at this age I would enjoy it more or not. So first of all, I'm going to talk about a book series that I want to give a second chance. And I'm not saying that I didn't finish this book. I actually did finish this book, but I didn't continue on with the series because I just didn't have any motivation to, because of the reviews that the rest of the series gets. And that, my friends, is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I think I want to give this series more of a chance now that we have a spin-off called Once Upon a Broken Heart. I'm actually more intrigued in Jax's story from what I've heard of the synopsis than I am with continuing on with Caraval, because I've heard that the finale, but also the final book finale, is not necessarily the best book in the series, and Legendary apparently has a little bit of second book syndrome where the second book is not as thrilling as the first book's plot. I've just heard all these different takes, these hot takes, these reviews on the rest of the series, and Caraval was a fascinating start to a series, but I wasn't that fascinated to continue on with the series. I wasn't too attached to the characters, even though I could resonate with Scarlet. I felt like Scarlet and Tella's sibling relationship reminds me of myself and another one of my siblings, and I feel like I'm on the Scarlet side of the spectrum, even though a lot of people think that Scarlet is the more boring character. And honestly, guys, I don't know why. Scarlet is not only responsible, but she's logical, you know? Like, she thinks with logic. I believe that the next book follows Tella's perspective, and then the final book has both their perspectives. I'm curious to see how that goes, but yeah, I kind of do want to give Caraval a second chance, even though I really feel like I want to skip to Once Upon a Broken Heart. Now I'm going to bring up a book that I read a few years ago, and I want to continue on with the series. I did not enjoy this first book when I first read it. I felt like the first book was pretty overhyped at the time, but I'm wondering if like 5 to 6 years later, I will think differently. An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I hear nothing but great things about the series. There isn't really much criticism for it. If there's criticism for it, it has to do with the ending. I know one thing that happens at the ending, and my friend told me, and the reason why she told me is because she said that she was doing me a favor, and I kind of feel like she was doing me a favor. However, everything else about the series I know absolutely nothing about, except I just remember that I was bored reading the first book. It just didn't feel like it was moving. I actually don't even remember how this book went, but what I do know is that I was bored when I was reading it, and I think that things will probably change potentially now that I'm a more mature reader and I'm fine with slower paced books. books, but also with series build-ups. I'm gonna see if this works out well for me. All I know is that when I first read it, I just was not enjoying it that much, and I think I was just expecting it to entertain me more, but I didn't care about the characters. And this time around, I want to care more about the characters. And another book that I want to bring up is a book that I've been hesitant to continue on with because of the series that it spins off from. When I was getting through the first like chapter or two, I was already just feeling my blood boil because there's a series that comes before it that the way that it ended still makes me mad. But I don't want that to affect my reading experience for Dance of Thieves. I love Mary E. Pearson's writing style, and honestly, I think that she writes romantic plots pretty well. I mean, if we're not including The Beauty of Darkness. Problem is, I don't want to feel the same resentment that I felt when I was reading The Beauty of Darkness when I'm reading Dance of Thieves. So when I started this book, all I felt while I was reading about this world was anger. And I did not want to feel that because I'm going into a new series to read a new series. I want my revisit of this world to be a positive experience, if anything. And for some reason, I was just really angry when I first started it. It just got me really fired up and I had to put it down. You know what? I put it down for the right reasons. I really did, because I don't want how angry I feel about what happened in The Beauty of Darkness to affect me while reading this duology, because I hear great things about this duology and I don't think that the characters that we're following in this duology deserve my anger and frustration from the previous book. I'm still gonna give it a second chance. I'm not going to quit. I am determined to get through the series and to read more from Mary E. Pearson, because as much as I really don't agree with what she did to a specific character in the prior book, I want to trust her again. The next book I want to bring up is probably one of the main reasons why I made this video. I was bored reading the series the first time I read it, and I think I was annoyed with the characters. The thing that I was lacking, that I was wanting when I first read this series, was magical fantasy. I think I was more into like those chosen one characters who were always on the battlefield, who were always taking charge. I was in that younger stage of my young adult reading time that I could not appreciate this series. Pretty sure I rated all the books like 1 or 2 stars. I didn't enjoy it. I feel like that was because I probably wasn't mature enough in my reading experience to really appreciate it. I talk about a series that I recently purchased special editions for, and I don't regret purchasing special editions for the series because, in all honesty, I don't think I have an intense hatred for the series. I think I was just bitter that I didn't find the type of book that I wanted to read at the time that I read it. The Winners Trilogy. If you guys are wondering why I have this beautifully designed cover that doesn't look like the original, it's because that this is the Illumicrate special edition of the first book, and I have the rest of the trilogy on my shelf. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to be honest, very honest. The original covers are beautiful. However, I didn't like them. The reason why I didn't like them, I thought that they were too dramatic. I think just seeing Kestrel on the cover being like, that really turned me off. When I think about it now, that photo shoot is pretty badass. Like, it really is. But when I first looked at those covers, I'm not gonna lie, I cringed a lot. And honestly, I don't think that that's fair. But I did cringe a lot, and I did badmouth those covers a lot. And yeah, when they had a cover change, I was kind of being a jerk about it, and I'm saying, yeah, you know, like, those covers look a lot more badass. But if I'm to be real, and I feel like everybody agrees here, those covers don't necessarily reflect what this series is about. I was kind of playing devil's advocate there. I was very edgy. We have the Alephian art covers now, so like we don't really have to talk about those ones anymore. If it wasn't for Alephian literally illustrating these beautiful covers, I don't actually think that I would have given thought or considered picking this series up for a second time and seeing if this works out. I think this situation probably mostly resembles the Daughter of Smoke and Bone situation because I barely remember anything about these books except that they are very intricate in its political plotline. Political fantasy wasn't necessarily something that I was big on. It is now. I really love a good political fantasy now, but at 19 years old, I mostly preferred books that had like dystopian elements in them, where the protagonist takes charge of everything, but like not too deep in the politics of things, but never really cared about the strategic protagonist, the ones who like to strategize, which is who Kestrel is. Also, I just remember being annoyed with Aaron. I think it's because that at the very beginning of the series, obviously, he's a bit angry due to his circumstance. I mean, it's understandable, but I never had empathy for him. So I actually really think I owe it to the series to give it a second try, because I didn't really have any empathy for any of the characters originally. The next book I have to bring up is a book that I just started at the wrong time and I do want to continue on with. This series is technically on my series TBR for the year, so it's definitely one that I want to get to soon, but I just haven't necessarily been motivated to pick this one up. That, my friends, is the Covenant Saga by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I didn't actually know that this also has a spin-off, and my friend only just started the spin-off. Very much looking forward to giving this world a shot. I kind of do want to get into the series, not just because everybody was raving about it a few years ago, but I have a friend who's raving about it now. I know that I'm gonna have a good time with Jennifer L. Armentrout, but for some reason, every single time I think about this first book, I'm a little bit intimidated, because I started this first book when I was looking for something that was probably a lot more fantastical rather than paranormal. I want to give it a second shot so I can let you guys know whether it's worth reading or not. And the next book that I want to mention, I put down for similar reasons. I wasn't in the mood to read it. I attempted to start this like, what, 2 or 3 times, and I just really need to attempt again. I don't think that it's the book's fault. It's just the mood that I'm in when it comes to like specific kinds of fantasy, or the mood of the fantasy itself. And that, my friends, is Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. I like to view this as very grim every single time I read it, but every single time I found myself wanting to start this book, I stopped because I realized I actually want to read something that's a bit more upbeat and a bit more light than this. I really feel like that does need to change. Maybe it's a little bit more upbeat and I just don't know. But I've had many chances to start this book and I just really haven't taken the opportunity to continue it. And next I want to talk about Jade City, or the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Now this is a very interesting situation. I read this first book in one of the rounds of the Term Topple readathon previously, and the thing is, I read so many good books in that readathon. I read the David trilogy in that readathon. I read White Teeth. I even read the Wind Up Bird Chronicle, which is one of my favorite Murakami books ever. But this was the least memorable book, and I think I was just trying to get through this one so I could get to my next read. Good for me back then. That was quite unfortunate because this book did not have much of an impact on me at all, to the point that I've forgotten everything about it. I feel like I skim read it. Of course, I mean, readathons, you're meant to be like competitively reading, because that's essentially what it is. It's a reading marathon, you know? But in this situation, I really feel like I shouldn't have read it in a readathon. I honestly think that I should have taken the time to read this book, to soak it in. I'm really ecstatic that I have the special editions of this series, but I really owe it to my special editions to make sure that this series is read and to make sure that the series is enjoyed. And the next book that I've got to mention is a book that I have to give a second chance for slightly controversial reasons. I'm going to mention it as someone who is of Middle Eastern descent. The last thing I want to do is offend people here, but hear me out. It has nothing to do with the content of the book itself. It has to do with a way that I read it. So I'm going to talk about We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. The reason why I need to give this book a second chance is because I listened to it on audiobook. I don't want to offend, but I don't think that it was right to get 2 white people narrating the audiobook, especially if majority, if not all, of the characters in here are Middle Eastern. Audible and like audiobook companies, they've done a very good job with casting people of the cultures that the audiobooks are set in, or of the ethnicity of the author themselves. This is an own voices novel. Usually it would not take me out of the story. Usually I wouldn't be able to tell. In this case, I could tell, because I'm Middle Eastern. The way that some things were pronounced and the way that some things were said, it really took me out of the story, because I could only really imagine these characters as white. And you know, I mean no disrespect to the voice cast whatsoever. Steve West and Fiona Hardingham are 2 of my favorite audiobook narrators. Fiona Hardingham narrated Furyborn, and that is one of my favorite audiobooks of all time. Steve West narrated Strange the Dreamer and The Crown's Game, and those are some of my favorite audiobooks of all time. So I mean no disrespect by them. However, them narrating this story in particular, when I was listening to the audiobook, it took me out of the story because the performance did not feel authentic for the characters that they were narrating. Now, this could have been a different situation if I wasn't Middle Eastern myself, but being that I am around the people in my family and people in my culture a lot, I know how they talk, I know how they pronounce things, and I know how they interact. That's why I couldn't buy into actually listening to on audiobook We Hunt the Flame. Probably going to change my reading method the second time around. I'm probably not not gonna listen to the audiobook, or maybe I'm just gonna listen to the audiobook again. I really don't know. The second last book that I want to give a second chance on this list today is Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. This is another audiobook situation where the audiobook took me out of the story. So the audiobook narrator for Realmbreaker, I've heard them narrate many other audiobooks before. However, I don't think that their voice was the best for Realmbreaker. Not necessarily their voice, just the voices that they put on for specific characters. I don't think that that was good enough to be immersed in this story, and I really can't describe it. I think that it's just a matter of either listening to it yourself or to look at the reviews, because the reviews that I'm seeing of Realmbreaker's audiobook are pretty similar to mine. And once again, I'm not saying that the audiobook narrator has no talent, because they do. I've heard them narrate other audiobooks and they've done a great job. Like, they even narrate the Skyhunter duology, and they do some of the Air Awakens audiobooks. I highly recommend those. However, I don't think that their performance suited the Realmbreaker book, and it really did also take me out of the story. I want to give this book a second chance, mostly because I feel like I consumed it in the wrong format. I want to enjoy it and soak it in once again before the second book comes out. And the final book slash series that I want to give a second chance, that I don't really talk about much here on my channel. It's kind of devastating that I've put the series on hold for such a long time and I've been intimidated to continue on, but I really do want to continue this series. And that, my friends, is The Trials of Apollo by Rick Riordan. I am 3 books into the series, and I reread the first book. I believe I reread the second book, and I reread the third book like a few times, but I'm never usually motivated to continue on. And I know the series mojo is not the same mojo as the Heroes of Olympus or Percy Jackson, but I want the same fiery, burning passion that I had for the rest of Rick Riordan's books in this world. So what I'm going to do going forward, because clearly rereading the Trials of Apollo books are not working enough for themselves, I have decided that I want to reread the books from Percy Jackson and the Olympians, moving on to the Heroes of Olympus and continuing on to the end of Trials of Apollo, at least in the lead up to the next series that is going to be following Nico and Will. I really love this series. It deserves the hype and attention that it gets. I've mentioned this like once or twice on my channel. I really want to get my cousin into Percy Jackson, and so maybe when she's reading the Percy Jackson books, that will be some sort of motivation for me to reread Percy Jackson, to get back into this world and to get that momentum again, because I really miss this world. I miss being in love with it, but at the moment that love is slightly fading, and that's because I'm forgetting everything. I want to give this series my time, my attention, and my affection the way that I used to. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay till the end of the video, leave me the mug with, I don't know, tea or coffee emoji. I started this video off drinking my tea. I guess it suits. If you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social media. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.